Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and this is my review for Star Wars The Clone Wars, the series. I've talked about the movie well enough, but now it's time to officially talk about the series that, in my opinion, is the best thing in the Star Wars series besides the original trilogy. But believe it or not, the series actually didn't start out this way, and I'm not even talking about the movie. When I reviewed the movie back in 2016, I mentioned that I saw it during the holiday break of Season 1, so I had seen all the episodes in Season 1 up to that point. And the series actually premiered in October, 2 months after the movie was released, and I thought, just based on the reviews that I read that kept me from seeing the movie in theaters, that it was going to be terrible as well. And I think a lot of people had the same mindset of, oh god, if the movie really is this bad, then that's gotta mean this series is doomed. But because I'm a massive Star Wars fan, I always need a Star Wars fix every once in a while, so the first 2 episodes premiered on the same night, and when I watched those first 2 episodes, I thought to myself, hey, that wasn't that bad, that was actually kinda cool. I mean, it's not groundbreaking, it's nothing that I need to go home and write about, but it's certainly a lot of fun. And I say it's nothing worth rushing home to write about because this series debuted when I was 17 years old. I was a junior in high school and well beyond the point where I should be watching Cartoon Network. But again, because I was a massive Star Wars fan, I just needed to see it. And that's pretty much the consensus of the first 2 seasons, actually, is that they're fun. There are a handful of stinkers here and there, but it's a fun Star Wars series. Revenge of the Sith is better, but it's definitely a lot of fun. So where does the series actually get to the point where I say it's the best thing since the original trilogy? Well, that starts to change sort of around Season 3. A lot of stuff that I wasn't a fan of in the movie is actually addressed and is more well developed this time around. For one thing, Ahsoka Tano. In the movie, she was just a bratty kid that got on my nerves, and her relationship with Anakin Skywalker didn't feel like an authentic master and student relationship. It just felt, like I've said countless times, an old married couple that would not stop arguing with each other. But as the series has gone on, Ahsoka Tano has actually become a more mature character. She starts to learn a lot and becomes one of the most mature Jedi out there. And at this point, at the time I'm recording this review, she has turned into one of the best characters in the franchise. She's an excellent strategist, she's kind, she's thoughtful, she's gone through a lot of troubles that has made her character as mature as she is. And in a way, she kind of reminds me of Steve Rogers. Let me explain. When I look at Steve Rogers' Captain America, I get the impression that this is a guy that is supposed to represent what America can be. Ahsoka Tano, in the prequel era, represents what the Jedi Order could be. Because even though the war has been going on ever since we were introduced to this character, and ever since she became Anakin's apprentice, she has the ideals that the Jedi should be peacekeepers and not soldiers. And there are a lot of elements in the series where she really grows as a character. Another character that I mentioned in the movie that wasn't all that interesting was Captain Rex. And even when I'm first introduced to this character, he just seems like a very strict and hard-ass clone captain, and that's just not really all that interesting to me. But Captain Rex also goes through a lot of elements that makes him a great character in his own right. He was a clone that was manufactured to take orders without question, and all he ever knows is war. But he experiences a lot throughout this journey that makes him sort of question his morality and makes him more of an independent thinker. Like when he meets a clone that ran away from the war and started a family, when he's under the leadership of another Jedi general whose plan is very reckless and ill-conceived, and that's at the point where Rex questions his command. And it also leads into probably the best thing that this series has ever done, is take all the clones and give them personalities, distinguish all of them from each other. And that's something that I never thought could have been accomplished, especially when you look at the prequels. The clones really were just clones. They were all the same being, no personality at all. They weren't different from one another. And the fact that they seemed to always be in on the fact that Order 66 was going to happen was something that I honestly thought was dumb. But the Clone Wars not only gives them more personality, and again distinguishes them from one another, but it gives certain individual clones character arcs, and even makes them tragic characters. One of the biggest things about the series and the clones is that we get more clarity on Order 66, where it's something that the clones weren't in on. Ever since the clones were first created, they've been implanted with inhibitor chips that basically takes over their entire brain and orders them to kill all the Jedi in order to help Palpatine/Darth Sidious rise and create the Galactic Empire. And given how much time we spend with a good amount of clones in this series, it makes these characters incredibly tragic. And honestly, some of the best arcs in the series revolve around the clones and what it means to be individualized, and at what point are all of these individuals who look identical considered living beings or considered property. It's much like with a lot of movies that involve artificial intelligence, like Blade Runner or Ex Machina. It's an aspect of Star Wars that really hasn't been delved into as much as the Clone Wars. There have been hints at this kind of stuff with droids, but never on this deep a level. The series also does a fantastic job of fleshing out the characters that we have known from the prequel movies, and kind of makes me appreciate those movies a little more. A lot of members of the Jedi Council that are just background in the movies are given personalities, and we get to know about them a little more, like Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, Luminara Unduli, Ayla Secura, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Mace Windu. And we even get a little more clarification with the villains, like Count Dooku and General Grievous. But the biggest thing that this series does that makes the prequels retroactively better in a way is the brotherhood relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. The banter between these two characters is a lot more authentic than in Attack of the Clones. You really get to see these two bond and realize that they have become really good friends. And also, Anakin's turn to the dark side is more believable. Within Revenge of the Sith, it still feels like a light switch and kind of inorganic, but in this series we get to see little hints as to why Anakin would want to turn to the dark side. Because the prequels themselves, it kind of makes no sense for Anakin to just suddenly turn. But when you think about this series in context with the big picture, it makes a lot of sense why this Jedi would turn to the dark side and ultimately become Darth Vader. And speaking of the dark side, this show can get surprisingly dark in its later seasons. When it comes to characters that we've seen in the movies, we know they're gonna live, so whenever there's an episode that's focused on a specific character that we know lives to Revenge of the Sith, there's really no tension. But for everyone else, this show is not afraid to go Game of Thrones and kill off characters that we have been rooting for this whole time. There are a number of clones that we have grown attached to throughout this series, and that have distinct personalities that get killed off. And there are even some characters that appeared in Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones that get killed off in this series alone. There are a couple of members of the Jedi Council that we see in the first two movies that get killed off in this series. The Gungan General who's in the Phantom Menace, he gets killed off in this series. So when you get to the show's later seasons, that's when it really starts to get good and becomes the Batman animated series of Star Wars. And one final thing that this series does really well that I would get crucified over if I didn't mention it is how they handle Darth Maul. Because when it comes to Star Wars, I honestly am not a big fan of when they bring back characters who we thought were long dead. Like, I hated it when they brought back Emperor Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker. And I kind of groaned at the idea that Darth Maul would be back in the Clone Wars. But much like with the clones, bringing back Darth Maul in this series actually makes him a more interesting character. He's given more personality. He's actually a character this time around than he was in The Phantom Menace. And the voice actor Sam Witwer, who played Starkiller in the Force Unleashed games, does a really fantastic job and gives Maul that true sense of menace that he was missing in The Phantom Menace. That movie should have just been The Phantom in that case. And every time there's a Clone Wars arc that involves Darth Maul, it is just some of the best Star Wars that this series has to offer. Now, for all the things that I've just praised this show for, and I stand by my statement that this is the best Star Wars since the original trilogy, There's a handful of stuff that just flat out sucks in this series. And with 7 seasons, you know there's going to be a handful of episodes that are just downright stinkers. I'll go over a full list of my favorite and least favorite arcs, but there are a handful of episodes that are clearly made with kids in mind, and they just feel like filler more than anything. The battle droid voices. Even back in 2005, when I loved Revenge of the Sith, I was still incredibly irritated by the high-pitched battle droid voices. And in this series, the battle droids are just downright incompetent. If it wasn't for the fact that Palpatine was playing both sides of the war, you would constantly ask yourself, how are these things so hard to defeat? Why is this war taking as long as it is, considering that the battle droids are just downright incompetent? Thankfully, the battle droids are utilized less as the series goes along, but with the first 2 seasons, every time a battle droid would do something stupid or say something that was intended to be funny, I just roll my eyes. And now in terms of elements of the prequel films that the series unfortunately did not fix, Jar Jar Binks. I really don't need to say any more outside of the fact that every time Jar Jar Binks is in an episode, he just brings it down. He does something so incredibly stupid, but the thing that just irritates me more than the stupid thing that he does is the fact that everyone around him treats him like he's goddamn Columbo, where he just plays dumb. And especially Padme. On one hand, you gotta give props to Padme for just being as patient as she is with Jar Jar, but at the same time, she gives him more of a benefit of the doubt than anyone in the entire galaxy. Which unfortunately brings me to another prequel element that I don't think was improved by the show, and that's Padme Amidala. Padme has always been my least favorite character in the prequel films, and unfortunately this series didn't really do a whole lot to improve her character. In this series, Padme is mostly reduced to just being a plot device. Again, she's way too tolerant of Jar Jar Binks, and she can be a downright idiot at points. I don't remember which episode or which season it was, but there's one season where she has a blaster pointed at Count Dooku, who she knows is a Sith Lord, and Count Dooku just casually uses the Force to spin the blaster the other way to have Padme kill someone who is on her side. And I'm just like, I've got no sympathy. So again, that's my unpopular Clone Wars opinion right there. Everyone's gonna have one unpopular opinion about this series, and mine is that Padme was not improved as a character. And then there were some problems in the first 2 seasons of the show that honestly got fixed as the series progressed. One, the animation. When Disney Plus would drop episodes of Season 7, I made the mistake of watching an episode of Season 1 right after finishing an episode of Season 7, and it's a very bizarre and jarring jump. I jumped from the 4th episode of Season 7 to the episode in Season 1, Downfall of a Droid, because that was actually the first episode produced for the show. And the animation in that episode is just, ooh lord. It's like when you play Red Dead Redemption 2 on the PS4 and all of a sudden you jump over to Life of Black Tiger, The Rage of Black Tiger, and you're like, how are these two in the same group? But thankfully, as the series goes along, the animation gets a hell of a lot better and is just gorgeous. I've really grown accustomed to this art style. And another thing that I really didn't like about this series, within retrospect, was how Ahsoka dressed in the first 2 seasons. They really gave her a revealing costume, and rewatching those older episodes as a 29-year-old, I just feel creepy by watching it. Like, it's just like, ooh, this is something that... bad call. Really bad call. But luckily her outfits later on are much more appropriate. So again, those are 2 things in the show that I did not think were handled well, but got fixed as they progressed. To wrap things up, this is a show that really started out as just pure fun, and then just evolved into, this is getting really good, and then stuck its landing with being one of the best things in the franchise, because the Siege of Mandalore arc is truly amazing. The action in that final arc is exciting, it's tension-filled, the music sounds drastically different than the rest of the series, and I love how the events of this arc play simultaneously with Revenge of the Sith, where both these stories just play beautifully at the same time. And once Order 66 is initiated, that's when the arc really gets dark and just the series just sticks its landing. That final scene where Ahsoka and Rex basically bury all the dead clones that tried to kill them because of Order 66 is poetic, and it really plays into how considerate and caring Ahsoka is as a character. And to see it transition into the days of the Empire, where Vader visits that crash site, and just kind of comes to terms with the fact that his Padawan is gone, it's a beautiful way to end the series. And the series has also done a number of great things. Like I mentioned before, it made me appreciate the prequels a lot more. It gave us more depth to the clones, pre-existing characters. It's got some great action. It's got that great Star Wars humor that we're all familiar with. And it's given us some other fan favorite characters besides Ahsoka Tano and Captain Rex. It gave us the pirate Hondo Ohnaka, who we later see in Star Wars Rebels, and Smuggler's Run at Galaxy's Edge, and Saw Gerrera, who would eventually show up in Rogue One, Rebels, and Jedi Fallen Order. It's a fantastic series, and I would love to talk more about it just because I love it that much, but I gotta wrap things up. So to wrap up this review, I'm gonna give you my picks for the best arcs in the series, the ones that, if you watch this series for the first time, which you should, these are the ones you have to go to. The fun arcs where you watch them and you'll enjoy them, but they're nothing super special. And then the bad arcs, which are the ones that you absolutely have no business in watching. So in the tradition of my channel, I'm just going to get the bad arcs out of the way right now. The Bombad Jedi episode, or really any episode with Jar Jar, is not worth your time. The Blue Shadow Virus episode, because there's really no stakes and we know the characters are going to come out alright. The Nomad Droids episode, where C-3PO and R2-D2 get separated from the Republic and go on their mini adventure. It's not really worth it. And then the Droid Mission episode, where R2 and a bunch of other tiny droids are sent on a mission. It's in Season 5, and it's not really a good arc, except for the fact that it makes the Clone Commandos canon. And anything with the Clone Commando Gregor is awesome. And now for the fun arcs. The Malevolence and Battle of Ryloth arcs in Season 1 are a lot of fun. The second Battle of Geonosis in Season 2's fun as well. The Zillo Beast arc in Season 2, because, hey, I'm a big Godzilla fan. And the Bad Batch arc from Season 7 is nothing too groundbreaking, and honestly, I'm not a huge fan of Echo still being alive, but it's still a fun arc, and the Bad Batch themselves are just really fun characters. And now here are the best arcs. Anything involving Mandalore or Darth Maul. The Domino Squad arc, which actually spans between one episode in Season 1 and 2 episodes in Season 3. That's the point in the series where I was shown for the first time that clones could be individualized and have their own personalities. And then the Battle of Umbara is probably my favorite arc besides the Siege of Mandalore, and that's in Season 4. The Mortis arc in Season 3 gives us a brand new aspect of the Force and is just a fascinating arc in its own way. Any of the episodes of Season 4 that involve Dathomir, the Night Witches, and Maul's return are worth watching because they introduce magic to the world of Star Wars, which in a way kind of is a neat parallel to the religious angles of the Force. So those are some episodes that are definitely worth checking out. The final arc in Season 5, where Ahsoka is wrongly accused of a crime she didn't commit and then leaves the Jedi Order because they turned her back on her. Then there's the first and last arcs of Season 6. The first arc being where we get more clarification on Order 66 and the inhibitor chips. And then the last arc where we see Yoda learn more about the netherworld of the Force. And then there's the Siege of Mandalore arc in Season 7. Those are the best arcs that I can recommend if you're watching this series for the first time. And if you started watching this series since the movie, but just kind of stopped around Season 2, then I beg you to keep going, because Season 3 starts to get better, but it's in Season 4 where the show really finds its voice, and as I said, becomes the best thing in the Star Wars franchise besides the original trilogy. So if I were to give this show a rating, I would say get off your ass and go see it right now. But be selective with your episodes. Again, there are a handful of episodes that are not worth watching. There are a handful of episodes that are worth watching but aren't anything special. And then there are the essential episodes that will truly make you appreciate not this show, but the prequels themselves. And there you go, that's my review for the Clone Wars animated series. I hope you enjoyed it, and now I want to know what you guys think about this series. If you've seen it, what did you think? What are some of your favorite and least favorite arcs within this series? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, leave a comment, support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until then, this is the Real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.